Welcome to the presentation for converting from HELiOS to SUSE Linux Enterprise Server. We are here talking about GE Healthcare and their experience coming over. My name is Thomas Keeley. I am with SUSE Consulting, and I am joined by system engineer from GE Healthcare, Andy Peed. Andy?
Thank you. We'll start with a really quick walk through the agenda. The first section being Genesis, what HELiOS is, and what historical use of SUSE products there has been at GE Healthcare. Then we'll get into the SUSE Linux Enterprise Server strategies for SLES 15 and what those entail. And finally, we'll cover transformation, what we've done so far, and how we're moving forward. The first part, which we've called Genesis, basically has its roots in where we're starting from, which is HELiOS, Healthcare Enterprise Linux Operating System, not to be confused with the Transputer operating system. HELiOS is an internal derivation to GE, which is based upon scientific Linux and therefore in turn from Red Hat. It has a limited subset of packages which we integrate and add from EPEL and software collections, plus a couple from our own internal platforms group. All of it is maintained internally and supported internally as well. And there are currently two families available, HELiOS 6, which hits end of life technically at the end of this year, but I think our last release will be in 2021. And then HELiOS 7, which comes end of life in 2024. We also have some history of SUSE product use at GE Healthcare. The first path being a very highly customized operating system based on SLES 9, I believe it was, used by the computerized tomography platforms and maybe one other, and then they moved to having SUSE build those products for them based on SLES 11 and SLES 12. Those are largely manually constructed and maintained on an on-demand basis per product line, not for the entire family of products. And it is really an approach which is not scalable or maintainable when you start looking at the puzzle of taking an operating system and applying it across the board to all of the GE Healthcare products. So that brings us to looking at SLES 15 for that approach. And we wanted to look at SLES 15 primarily because it is so heavily tuned towards an Internet of Things approach and a services-based architecture approach, which falls very firmly into the strategy that GE Healthcare is adopting towards providing a healthcare services architecture. And there's an advantage in that since we have the past experience with SUSE, it's a near seamless transition for those products, and that transition activity then gives us best-in-class practices which we can apply to other product lines and allow them a similarly painless or more painless transition activity. And then, of course, we have several key support staff who are all at SUSE who are already known to our development groups. So there is a comfort level there. And last of all, for a support time frame of 10 to 12 years, SUSE was deemed to be much more cost efficient. Always a compelling argument. Now, as to how we're applying that to more than one product group, because that's really the puzzle that we're attacking, I'm going to backtrack for a moment. The HELiOS internal operating system, as I said, is internally maintained, which means that there's a certain measure of software development lifecycle which we apply, and those software development lifecycle artifacts are then made available to be referenced by the product groups as part of their design history file, which is the overarching record of authority, if you will, or authoritative origin for any software product that's applied to a hardware platform in the instantiation of a GE healthcare healthcare product, I guess is a way of putting it. When it comes to taking that third-party off-the-shelf operating system and putting it into that environment, there was a certain amount of concern as to how do we provide that sort of traceability coming from the specific healthcare applications to an operating system in context in which it operates. And what we do is we create a vendor management interface for that relationship so that we collect requests from the various GE healthcare products and funnel them into SUSE and coordinate that development activity between or with SUSE and getting the results back out to the GE healthcare products. We also champion their causes, if you will. If there's a specific concern with a functionality or a specific bug fix or a specific need, we take those interests and drive them very intensively with SUSE to create those solutions or get those concerns addressed in a timely manner and then feed the results back into the GE healthcare product. The other thing that's been really advantageous for us is that we take the yes testing philosophy to a set of GE healthcare representative hardware platforms and configurations. You may be familiar with yes testing as a certification platform for the SUSE Linux Enterprise Server software. This is kind of a specific application of that test suite set, plus a small collection of specific GE healthcare cases to a specific configuration of a hardware platform. So we will take a base platform that's already yes certified and we'll flesh it out with all the storage that's required, all the memory that's required, specific hardware if it's needed to talk to a specific type of scanner interface, for example, plus the specific network interfaces, and we'll run them through the test suite again to verify that the additional hardware imposes no limitation on the performance of the operating system. We also generate a collection of documentation for the product groups to reference directly from the SUSE product artifacts, if you will. These are largely packaged with the SUSE ISOs and to an extent with the SUSE errata information as we get it to our SUSE Manager server. It's the list of the package manifest, the change logs. We put them into a searchable format so that a specific developer can actually run a search for a specific package name or a change update or maybe a CVE number to assess where that solution has been applied and what it is going to impact. We also finally coordinate what we call our ongoing anomaly review process. And this is getting representatives from our GE healthcare products to all sit together and look at two things. The first being the collection of updates coming downstream from SUSE. Now, whether it is a security update or a bug fix or a product enhancement, we get as many people as we can to put their eyes on it and say, I need to be aware of this. We need to prioritize a specific type of regression test to make sure that this update is exercised. Or this API has changed. This is how we need to take it into account. The other part of the ongoing anomaly review is the current list of open issues that GE Healthcare has identified. We revisit those on a regular basis and communicate updates that we received from SUSE as far as status so that we can coordinate roadmaps between SUSE and GE Healthcare products. And I'll turn it over to Thomas to get into the details of our deployment infrastructure.
The GE Healthcare has decided to go with a SUSE Manager centralized solution so that we can actually curate the channels, as Andy said, and put them together in a distributable method. We have set up a server in their home office in Wisconsin, which acts as the repository for all those packages that have been approved and are now available to the various modalities to be used for package development, other testing, whatever particular needs are needed from the SUSE operating system internal to GE Healthcare. We basically are pulling in all the artifacts from SUSE, of course, for SUSE Linux Enterprise Server, but we're also pulling in other packages that they need, for instance, from NVIDIA or perhaps Package Hub, where we're pulling in other requirements that modalities have that they need to generate their packages to create for their customers. We take that and then we also will geo-separate them by using SUSE Manager proxy, where we've now set up a proxy in India. We have one in Bouc, France. In the future, we'll have a location in Asia so that the developers and the actual development work is local and doesn't have to rely on the internal network for slowdown reasons or bandwidth. The connection between, for instance, the connection between Milwaukee and India is relatively slow, and it would take several hours to do a system installation that should generally only take 5, 10, 15 minutes. The architecture map, as it looks, is we pull, as I said, from various internet sources, including SUSE, to the local SUSE Manager, and then we push out to the various proxies. The as of the time of publication, the India and France locations were up and running and are being used quite heavily now. The advantages and speed differences and reliability has been very noticeable in the network because of this design.
We have a number of approaches that we're taking to making this transition. I already made a reference to the ongoing anomaly review. These assessment meetings happen weekly, and we currently have representation from, on average, 4 or 5 product groups, we call them modalities, as well as corporate security. So we have a number of eyes on every change coming in and every open issue from a number of perspectives. We also do twice quarterly roundtable discussions between my team, the OS support staff, SUSE support staff, which includes not only Thomas, but our technical account manager, our sales manager sits in on them. We have a couple of, what do they call themselves? The support
dedicated service engineers.
That's it. Who all then have an opportunity to talk amongst themselves from their own perspectives to come to a common understanding of common issues and things to learn from each other. We are taking what has typically been a manual build and productization process, and moving it towards an automated approach that will ultimately leverage both KIWI and AutoYast to create a OEM operating system deliverable specific, or that's limited to specifically what a given product needs from the operating system distribution, rather than the previous approach, which has typically been take the whole shebang, the entire distribution, whack it onto a storage media, and then have things, scripts that pull out what you need. We're also taking the opportunity of moving to a 64-bit exclusive approach and away from 32-bit architectures and dependencies, which at this late date is actually still a thing. We're also pushing a lot of inter-product group communication so that, not just through the quarterly or twice quarterly roundtable discussions or the ongoing anomaly reviews, but through just general, issue discussion. If we get a question from this product group over here saying, how do I productize this aspect, we can turn to this product group over here and say, these guys have already started working on that. You two should be talking to each other. We'll actively coordinate meetings between those groups. Sometimes we just get mail going back and forth. But we are very much working on tearing down what has traditionally been a product silo approach. And this has had a number of results. This is a quick list of milestones. All of this really got rolling back in last summer, June of 2019, when we first put the SUSE Manager server live. We got the initial SLES 15 SP1 release available to GE Healthcare shortly after, and then the proxies started going live after that. We have been pushing out the quarterly updates, which were a new thing for SLES 15 Service Pack 1, as the primary points along the way, if you want to call it that the primary collections for people to all focus in on as time elapses. And we'll be using that as impetus for product groups to stay current rather than to be frozen on a service pack for years and years and years at a time. Late last year, we had our first image collection prototype on a SLES 15-based platform. Earlier, I don't think I have it on this list. I don't. This spring, we had the first product go into beta testing, which is basically acceptance testing prior to going out to the field on a SLES 15 platform. And then this year we have gotten the quarterly update 2 out to GE Healthcare, and probably by the time this hits the airwaves next week, as it were, we'll have quarterly update 3 available as well. Back to Thomas.
The professional services staff actually had a great deal of influence on this, on the success of this, and it was kind of a team effort within SUSE to make this happen. Basically, we have a dedicated consultant on site, yours truly, that has been able to work very closely with the OS team and the various modalities to help them not only switch over their processes and their designs, but also to help incorporate some of the best-in-class philosophies and other good development practices for how to go forward. It so happens that since in the past I have had I've been a Red Hat certified engineer, I was able to leverage that with the HELiOS support as well. So not only can I help convert from HELiOS to SLES, but I can go one step further and actually support them as they are solving problems still in the HELiOS side in preparation for switching over to the SUSE standards. And I think that has helped a great deal. But more, my team in the background, the technical account manager that Andy referenced earlier, as well as our dedicated service engineers, have been able to support and work with the developers at GE Healthcare very closely to design and create processes or update routines or make packaging that has been able to not only speed up and make things more efficient, but also make things, like I said, standard and supportable ongoing, which will also help with updates, security patches, various other requirements that GE Healthcare or anyone in the healthcare field is going to have to deal with on a regular basis. Being an augmentation to their staff, I'm actually able to work as basically a GE employee on site, working with them in their processes, in their security groups, and actually create a very clear transition experience for GE that, while this is a very large project that is going over many years, is relatively easy to understand because it's centralized around this team and core dedicated SUSE staff. And this has led to some very interesting early results. Andy?
Okay. I think probably the most beneficial, or one of the most beneficial, is that we are seeing internal partnerships forming between specific product hardware groups and the hardware center of excellence to leverage that yes testing philosophy, which I referenced earlier, to identify similar hardware profiles across multiple product lines, which has a number of benefits, not least of which is the supply line. And it allows, a more coherent and orderly and efficient ordering procedure for stocking customers on the out far end. We are, as I said earlier, breaking down the product silos and getting development teams talking to each other, leveraging each other's work, and learning from each other, which has kind of been a little bit of a blank spot in our history. Leveraging that relationship with SUSE has also created or started to create strategies for introducing new functionality into SUSE products. This is a regular request from our product development groups. They'll say, I need a given release of a specific package, or I want this functionality, or I want this package built for SLES 15. We had it back in SLES 12. Where is it now? And rather than kind of leave them waiting on the hook until the next service pack or the next quarterly release, we can say, can we get it into the package hub? And that's been very successful. We have gotten a number of functionalities into package hub in a pretty quick and clean and timely manner, and had it there available for the development groups to use. And then at some point down the line, we fully expect that there are going to be some of those pieces parts that will then be pulled into the main SLES product. We are also really able to, I think, benefit from, again, the SLES philosophy of being focused on a services architecture. GE Healthcare is moving to a services network architecture for their own, particularly for their imaging products, but for all healthcare services. And you've already got most of the pieces parts there that we can build directly upon. And this is just remarkably beneficial for a healthcare approach, because where you had these great big monolithic implementations before, you are now breaking down specific areas of functionality and making each functionality much more robust and resilient, and providing the ability or the potential ability to make duplicate or instances of those capabilities available to a wider range of customer services using them. And it's, I think, a particularly exciting time to be at GE Healthcare and watch all of this development innovation come down the line and have so much support under the hood, as it were, from SUSE and from SLES itself. We are going to be continuing to push the idea of moving towards software appliances rather than the large monolithic systems, which gives us additional flexibility from a hardware interface perspective and from service deployments. It also gives us some ability to partner with other third parties for user interfaces and for data analysis and for a artificial intelligence application. We'll be leveraging the build automation capabilities to generate not only the internal process documentation, but ultimately end user and support technical documentation, just by being able to leverage what we're pulling out of SUSE Manager and drilling down to exactly what's needed for a given product, and then pulling that right into the documentation itself. Which reminds me, one thing I didn't touch on earlier, but which is rather key for us, is that in addition to things like the changelog and the package manifest, we also do look at things like licenses. So when we can pull together a concise list of licenses that are actually involved in a given product, we can point to them and say, here's what you're using. Make sure that how you use them is consistent with those licenses and that you are not putting GE Healthcare intellectual property into a position where it might be necessary to propagate that into the world that you wouldn't necessarily want to do. So we're getting the license analysis into a broader spectrum of awareness. It's not just the domain of legal anymore. It's something that everybody can be actively thinking about. And we can leverage SUSE Manager to help drive that. And then we are encouraging the product and the support groups to use SUSE Manager, not just our own server, but to perhaps at some point invest in implementations of SUSE Manager themselves to manage the deployment of their own software to their internal groups, as well as ultimately to external customers. And that pretty much concludes our presentation on the transformation or the conversion of HELiOS to SLES. Thank you for your interest in our experience thus far and our adventure going forward. I'm Andy Peed with GE Healthcare, and my co-presenter has been Thomas Keeley from SUSE Consulting. If you have questions, please do not hesitate to post them online. Thank you.
Thank you all for attending.